My name is Natalie Carter. I'm 33 years old. And if you had asked me just a month ago what the hardest thing I'd ever done was, I'd probably have said something like, I once led a covert mission through the Caucasus with no backup and half a satellite link. But now I'd tell you it was surviving Thanksgiving dinner without screaming. I still remember the first time I realized I wasn't the golden child. I was 19, sitting across from my mom in our little kitchen back in El Paso. It was one of those mornings, sunlight pouring in, coffee just strong enough, and that eerie calm before everything shifts. I'd just been commissioned. My uniform still had creases from the dry cleaner. I was glowing with pride, barely out of ROTC, thinking I'd made it. And then, Mom, so casually, said something that stuck to my bones like frostbite. Not everyone's meant to be exceptional, sweetheart, she said, smiling gently as if it was a compliment. Someone's got to support the stars. She didn't mean it to hurt, I don't think, but it did, deeply, like someone had just carved out the future I thought was mine and handed it to someone else. Every family holiday after that, I heard those words in the silences. When my sister's name, Olivia, lit up conversations like fireworks. When my dad posted her law school acceptance like it was the second coming. Meanwhile, I'd just gotten back from an overseas deployment, 7 months running black ops in regions no one would admit existed, and no one even showed up at the airport. You're always gone, Dad said when I asked, like I'd missed his birthday dinner or something. Not, nearly died in a city whose name isn't on any tourist map. At Thanksgiving, they gave my seat to the neighbor's kid, because apparently, getting into med school now ranks above surviving mortar fire. I ate standing up by the sink. My medals were still boxed in the garage. That night, I decided I was done. Done chasing a nod, a mention, even a smile. I'd faced enemy fire. I didn't need to dodge my own family's indifference anymore. Fast forward to last month. I was sitting quietly in the back of a command strategy briefing. I wasn't running it, just observing. The kind of meeting where every name drop is a flex and every title drips with unspoken history. I was just a face in the room, until the door opened. In walked General Hawkins, commanding presence, eyes like radar. He scanned the room, paused, and then locked eyes with me. His whole posture changed. Then, loud and clear, he said, "Ma'am, General Carter." And suddenly, the entire room stilled. For me. Not for Olivia, not for my brother Chris, for me. And you'd think that moment would feel sweet, right? Like redemption. So, before I tell you everything, before I take you through the missions, the betrayals, the nights that rewrote who I am, I want you to be here with me. If you're watching this, drop a listening in the comments. Or just say where you're tuning in from. Sometimes knowing someone's out there, it makes all the difference. And if what I share with you helps you feel less alone, if it lands somewhere inside you, please subscribe. It's how we make this truth echo a little further. So here we go. I'm Natalie Carter, firstborn of the Carter family, 3 generations deep in military tradition and silent expectations. Discipline wasn't a value, it was a lifestyle. We practically grew up saluting in our pajamas. Dad, Major Richard Carter, retired from the Navy with honors. Mom, Ann Carter, was a field nurse and medical trainer. My younger brother Chris is now a decorated Army major. And Olivia? She's the poster child. Lieutenant Colonel, Army JAG Corps, everyone's pride. And me? I'm the name that doesn't come up, the one they whisper about, if they mention me at all. To the world, I'm the dropout, The one who quit West Point after her first year. Couldn't handle the grind. Couldn't stay the course. But that's not the truth. I didn't leave. I was pulled, recruited, handpicked for a covert intel program so classified, it doesn't officially exist. No ceremony, no flag, no photo on the family wall, just one-way tickets to places you won't find on any map and missions you'll never hear about. I didn't disappear from their lives. I was erased, intentionally. My life had to exist in shadows. I sent Mom birthday flowers. Dad got Christmas cards from a fake Maryland address. I watched from afar while Olivia climbed the ranks, while Chris married his high school sweetheart on base. Their stories, well-lit, celebrated. Mine, censored out of the frame. Literally. A cousin once told me there's a family photo on the wall where I'd been cropped out. They said it was for balance. No one asked why I left. No one wanted to know. They said I wasn't tough enough. But what they didn't know was that I once spent 6 months coordinating a series of rescues from a compound in Libya. That I lost 3 good men during Operation Nightwind. That I spent 4 days hiding under floorboards in Aleppo with nothing but a signal jammer and a sidearm. And still, I came back. Just not home. Not where it mattered. In our family, you don't tell stories unless they come with fanfare. That night, I stood in front of my closet, staring at a uniform I hadn't worn in over a decade. Folded, pristine, waiting. I packed it, next to a beige blouse, neutral slacks, quiet colors so I wouldn't steal focus. Because that's what I'd been trained to do, blend in, even when I was screaming inside. I looked in the mirror, sharp eyes, desert lines across my mouth. Not young anymore, but not old, just hardened. I whispered, "It's time." And I meant it. Not just time to go, time to stop shrinking, time to let the silence finally speak. I pulled up to my parents' house just after dusk. Fort Saginaw hadn't changed much. Same beige fences, same dutiful American flag waving proudly above the porch. Same cracked sidewalk I used to rollerblade down in middle school. The driveway was packed, a lineup of polished sedans and shiny black SUVs, government-issued types. Clearly, Olivia had drawn a crowd. I parked a few blocks down and walked, boots crunching on gravel. It was funny, my feet still remembered the rhythm of this place, even if no one else did. Inside, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and overcooked ham. My mom stood in the dining room, placing name cards on the table. Without even looking up, she said, "Go change your shirt. You're sitting next to Olivia. Please don't interrupt her speech tomorrow." Not hello, not you look well, just orders. I nodded. Dad saw me next. He gave me a quick once-over and a stiff pat on the back. "Glad you made it," he said. But his eyes slid past me like I was just someone who used to work with him. And then Olivia made her entrance. Flawless, hair pulled tight, ribbons gleaming like they'd been buffed by angels. Her uniform, dress blues, impeccable, like a military version of a debutante ball. She swept through the room with practiced grace, hugging distant cousins, smiling for family friends, playing the role of the shining daughter. And then she saw me. "This is my sister," she said with a laugh, a manicured hand fluttering toward me. "She was in the service for a bit. I think she's working admin now? The laughter was polite, light, the kind that wounds without showing blood. A cousin leaned in. VA office, right? Better than nothing, huh? I didn't answer, just offered a soft smile and let it die in the air. Because sometimes silence is the only dignity you've got left. I scanned the house. Photos lined every... I crouched down, looked her straight in the face. Sweetheart, I once wrote an op plan that helped 30 soldiers make it home alive. That's better than any shot I've ever taken. She blinked, nodded, solemnly, then ran off to play with a plastic tank. Dinner that night was a small event, just family and a few close brass from Olivia's circle. Olivia played hostess like she was running for Senate, controlled, elegant, always just right. At one point, someone complimented her on her poise. She smiled, sipped her wine, and said, "I've been working on my speech. I want people to know you don't have to walk away from something to realize you were wrong." She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Everyone else did. That night, I stepped outside onto the porch. Behind me, the house buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. In front of me, the wind rustled the trees like it knew something. Across the lawn, I could hear a brass band rehearsing, the familiar military cadence echoing through the darkness. I sat on the steps, let the cool air wash over me, and whispered, "Let her have her moment." Because sometimes, letting people believe they've won is easier than exposing how much it cost you to stay quiet. The next morning, the promotion ceremony was held in the Fort Saginaw Grand Hall. It looked like a cathedral, vaulted ceilings, brass fixtures gleaming, rows and rows of chairs lined with precision, each labeled by rank, by role, by importance. I was seated in the back, row D7, between someone's fiancé and a general's mother-in-law who smelled like lavender and judgment. Our section was labeled Family Overflow. Translation, you're here, but not really. Then, Olivia stepped onto the stage. She stood tall, proud, the perfect soldier. She talked about duty, about honor, about the sacred weight of the uniform. Then she pivoted. "To those who abandoned that commitment," she said, voice strong, "we owe no allegiance. There are paths that lead away from service, but not all deserve a return." That wasn't a line meant for the brass. That was aimed directly at me. She called me a traitor, without saying my name. Heads turned, people whispered. One officer leaned in toward his colleague. "She looks familiar," he murmured. "Where have I seen her before?" I sat straight, expression calm, shoulders back. That's when it happened. The double doors at the side of the hall opened. In walked General Hawkins. The room shifted instantly, like a tide being pulled by the moon. He scanned the crowd, spotted me, and walked straight over. Stopped right in front of me, saluted. "Ma'am," he said, steady and strong. "General Carter, it's good to see you again." Silence fell. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mom drop her water glass. Dad rose slightly from his seat, then sank back like he was trying to vanish. The whisper behind me wasn't even subtle. "That's her. The one from Operation Firelight." And suddenly I wasn't the ghost anymore. I was the storm. After the ceremony, I didn't go back to the family house. I needed quiet, clarity, space to breathe. So I checked into one of the guest quarters on base. Those plain military rooms with beige walls, sheets that felt like paper, and a lamp that hummed just enough to drive you crazy if you paid too much attention. I tossed my keys on the dresser, kicked off my boots, and noticed something strange. A manila envelope, right in the center of the desk. No name, no seal, just there, like it had been waiting for me. I opened it, and my stomach dropped. Inside was a printed email, scanned and forwarded from a secure server that hadn't been in use for years. The subject line read, "Reckless Operation. Civilian Casualties." It was about me, specifically a mission I led. It claimed I had gone off script, that I'd authorized an unsanctioned operation that led to multiple civilian deaths, the kind of accusation that, if proven, could end a career and destroy a reputation beyond repair. But it wasn't just the content that chilled me, it was the wording. The language used in the email was lifted almost verbatim from a classified report I'd reviewed years ago while working in a reinforced bunker in Stuttgart. That report had only ever been seen by 3 people: myself, a lead intel analyst, and a junior officer with limited clearance. And that junior officer was Olivia. The timeline matched. So did the access point. I remembered back then there was a brief internal investigation, an automated flag. They said it was nothing, routine, resolved within days. But apparently, someone made sure the smoke lingered long after the fire was out. I took the envelope with me. I didn't change clothes. I drove straight to the post-ceremony reception, walked in through the side entrance, and found Olivia standing near the back patio, still in uniform, phone to her ear, laughing softly. When she saw me, she paused. "What?" I held up the printout. Her smile didn't drop immediately, but her eyes did. "You send this?" I asked, voice calm, not accusing, just asking. She stared at it, at me, then nodded. Yes, no hesitation, no panic, just yes. "Why?" I asked. She exhaled sharply, her whole posture deflated, like someone had just let the air out of her armor. "Because I didn't speak for a long time. There was nothing to say." Then finally I said quietly, "You do realize leaking classified intel is a federal crime." Her eyes widened for a moment, reflexively, then narrowed. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." I nodded. Intent doesn't erase impact. And then I turned and walked away, because no confrontation, no shouted argument would do what the truth already had. Later that night, I was jolted awake by a siren. Not the usual base alert, the kind that feels almost ceremonial, predictable. No, this was sharper, urgent, a real emergency. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a secure notification. "Emergency protocol. All high-clearance personnel report to command center immediately." I was out the door in less than 5 minutes. When I arrived, the command center was a storm of activity. People moving fast, screens lighting up, chatter thick with tension. At the entrance, a grim-faced sergeant handed me a file, thin but heavy. Inside, a classified breach report. Someone had leaked a segment of Operation Firelight, one of the most sensitive Black Ops campaigns of the last decade. The leak had been posted to an encrypted forum on the dark web just hours earlier, and the trace, it led back to me. More specifically, to an inactive device still logged into the base network under my old credentials. A dormant system, still technically connected. The implication was clear. I was being framed, and I had a pretty good idea by who. Within the hour, I was seated in a quiet room across from General Hawkins and 2 representatives from military intelligence. They didn't say I was under arrest, but the suspicion was thick enough to choke on. They asked for full access to my comms, logs, and internal activity for the last 6 months. I didn't protest. I handed everything over. But even as I complied, something gnawed at me. That email, the scan that had landed on my desk. So I pulled up the raw data from the image scan, traced the metadata, decrypted the pathways. What I found? Shocking. The original email had been sent through an outdated link, one that triggered a forgotten auto backup process, buried deep in a system I thought had been decommissioned. But that process also unintentionally attached a hidden cache of classified intel, a chain reaction, an accident, but the sender? The device used to initiate the message had been logged into just 2 days prior with an active credential tied to Olivia. She'd mentioned earlier, offhandedly, that she left her laptop unattended overnight in the comms station. Now, that careless moment had become the fulcrum. He looked older than I remembered. Not the sharp, no-nonsense military man I grew up with. Just tired. He didn't ask how I was. He just said, "Is it true? Did you leak it?" I met his eyes. "No, but I will prove the truth. Not for me. For the people who still trust this system with their lives." He nodded once, then walked away. No apology, but maybe, just maybe, a start. The next morning, I filed a request, an unusual one. I wanted to lead the internal investigation. Technically, I was still on reserve clearance, still active on Black Ops intelligence panels. But this wasn't about rules. It was about control. If I didn't steer this thing, I'd be the next casualty of someone else's mistake. General Hawkins didn't interrupt, didn't question it. He just looked at me, then slowly stood and extended his hand. "General Carter," he said, "the floor is yours." It was official. I was leading the inquiry into a breach I didn't commit, triggered by a sister who'd once tried to erase me. And the cherry on top? The internal task force was composed of my family. My dad, Major Richard Carter, was assigned to review campaign archives. He still had advisory clearance post-retirement. My mother, Anne, tapped for her forensic experience during her time as a combat medic, would assist with biological trace evidence, particularly from the laptop used to trigger the breach. And Olivia? She was to audit system vulnerabilities, tracing the digital pathways that led to the leak. It felt like a nightmare written by someone with a dark sense of humor, but I agreed, because even broken pieces can form a whole, if arranged right. Our first meeting was cold. Dad led the agenda with clipped sentences, eyes never rising from the screen. Mom watched us all like we were strangers in a movie she hadn't chosen to see. Olivia, she read from a tablet, monotone, emotionless, like she was testifying at a hearing she hoped would end quickly. But I wasn't there for apologies. I was there for answers. And then we found it. Buried deep inside one of Olivia's archived server scans, our security AI flagged a dormant Trojan, a digital parasite, tucked inside a logistics file from 2017. It had never activated, just slept, unnoticed, for years. But the file's date stood out to me. That was the year I'd butted heads with Derek Lane, an aggressive field strategist assigned to a joint operation in Mosul. He wanted to run a sweep through civilian zones, eliminate all. Late one evening, while sorting through storage reports, my mother silently handed me a worn folder. Operation Emberlight. "You left this behind," she said. "I read it back then. I thought you were hiding. Now, I think you were surviving." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Those words weren't an apology. They were something heavier. Recognition. Later that night, we got a ping. A remote IP logged into the system and attempted to wipe the breach logs. It failed. But the location? A roadside motel just outside Fort Saginaw. The reservation? Paid in cash. Registered under the name Derek Lane. Suddenly, this wasn't just about family. This was sabotage. A man hiding behind our fractured house, using Olivia's recklessness as camouflage. The raid on the old communications relay happened just before dawn. Derek was there. In the dark, dusty control room, sitting calmly at a terminal, uploading the last fragments of classified intel into an encrypted drive. He didn't run, didn't flinch. When I walked in, he turned and said simply, "Took you long enough." In interrogation, he confessed, flatly, without pride. "I didn't want to ruin you," he said. "Just get you out of the room. You rose too fast. No one questioned you anymore. I figured if your clearance got suspended, you'd disappear quietly, like you always have." He wasn't insane, just bitter, calculating. He had planted the malware years ago, waited, and when Olivia's email triggered it, he made his move. The only reason we caught it? The system error. The last-minute signature. And, ironically, Olivia's inability to cover her digital tracks. When we read Derek's full statement out loud during our next task force meeting, Olivia didn't speak. She just stared at the transcript, like she wanted to edit history with her eyes alone. "I didn't know it would go this far," she finally said, her voice barely a whisper. I folded my arms. "Sometimes we set fires in a dry field just to feel powerful," I said. "We forget people live there." Her face twisted slightly, but she didn't cry. That was Olivia. Pride before anything. The next day, she submitted an addendum to the investigation file. She accepted responsibility for sending the original email, for triggering the system, for being the spark. No one asked her to, but she knew what it meant. Her promotion? Gone. Suspended for 5 years. No commendation, no upward motion, just a formal reprimand. It didn't feel like a win, but it felt like truth. At the final meeting, we sat in that same stiff room, the air still heavy with silence. This time, Olivia looked at me and didn't look away. And when Dad stood to close out, it was the first time I had heard him say my name in a setting like that. Not Carter, not her, but Natalie. And for once, it didn't sting. It settled. The fog hung low over the base the morning of the... It wasn't dramatic, just quiet. Still. Like the world was holding its breath. I stood backstage beneath the buzz of a flickering projector, name badge clipped, pointer in hand. The banner behind me read, "Re-62 Senior Commanders, 30 Strategic Advisors, nearly 100 observers, people who had, at one point or another, either doubted me or didn't know I existed." In the second row sat Olivia. Her name was on the guest list. Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Carter, Field O. I'd sent the invite myself. No fanfare, no warning. Just a single note in the comments section. "It's time to learn Wudge." The lights. No one introduced me. I didn't need it. I walked up to the podium and started. "I won't begin with a war story," I said. "I'll begin with a truth. Some missions never get a name. Some leaders never get a plaque. And some battles don't start on borders. They start at home, where judgment replaces understanding, where silence becomes a second skin." Heads turned. I saw whispers ripple across rows. I could see the recognition blooming behind narrowed eyes. That's her. That's the woman who wrote the Eastern European Doctrine in 16. That's the one from Firelight. And Olivia? She didn't blink. She listened. Halfway through, I changed tone, shared for the first time an unreleased segment of Operation Emberlight. I signed an override that spared a target zone because we confirmed 7 children were still inside, I said. It nearly cost me my clearance. I'd do it again. Every time. Because the weight of command isn't about being right. It's about being able to carry the consequence of being human. Gasps. Not the scandal kind. The kind that comes from recognition. The kind that says, I never thought of it that way, but I should have. I closed the talk, then turned toward the side mic and said, To conclude, I've asked Lieutenant Colonel Olivia Carter to share her reflections as a next-generation officer. She stood. She looked different. Not defeated, not apologetic, just real. I grew up believing that being seen meant standing tallest, she said. That if you weren't applauded, you weren't worthy. But today I learned that real leadership doesn't always take the stage. It builds the stage. And the strongest voices don't always speak first. I used to think women didn't belong commanding battlefields, he said, gripping my hand firmly. I was wrong. I smiled, not out of pride, but because mistakes don't define us. Refusing to grow from them does. That night, I sent out 3 envelopes. One to Dad, one to Mom, and one to Olivia. Inside, a handwritten invitation. Dinner. Our old house. Just us. No expectations, just honesty. I arrived first. I set the table. I took the seat Dad used to claim, the head of the table. The one I had never once been invited to sit at. Mom arrived with a casserole, Olivia with a 6-pack of sparkling water. Dad showed up last, looking like he wasn't sure if this was a dinner or a court-martial. When we sat, I didn't ask how anyone was. I didn't ease in. I just started. I didn't quit the military, I said. I was recruited. Into a program that doesn't get medals, doesn't get press. I led missions that won't make the news, but saved lives all the same. I've been detained underground, shelled by our own air support, and once signed off on an op that sacrificed $1 million in hardware to save 6 soldiers I'll never forget. No one interrupted. I looked at them one by one. I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came because you never asked, and if you had, I'm not sure you would have believed me. Mom's eyes welled. Dad's were focused on a spot just over my shoulder. Olivia just stared at her plate. I used to send those care packages, Mom said softly, because I thought you were ashamed. I thought they were your way of saying sorry. They weren't, I said. They were my way of reminding you I still existed, even after you cropped me out. I pulled a folder from under the table. Yes, that folder. The email. The one Olivia had sent years ago. I slid it across to her. I didn't keep this to punish you, I said. I kept it to remind us all. Words can be weapons, even invisible ones. She didn't speak, just reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. No apology, no excuse. But sometimes silence can be a bridge too. Dad stood, walked over to the fireplace, and picked up a family photo, one from a summer cookout back in 2004. He stared at it for a moment. This one's missing someone, he said. We'll take a new one. I didn't smile. I just nodded. Because I didn't need to be celebrated anymore. I just didn't want to be erased. A few weeks later, I returned to D.C. Quiet apartment, strategic consulting work, life back in its pattern. But once a month, I flew back to Fort Saginaw to teach a course on. The Carters were still figuring it out. Mom started sending handwritten notes, one a month, usually short. "Are you eating enough?" she asked in the last one. Dad had started telling his buddies his daughter was a military strategist. No qualifiers, no dodging. We hadn't taken that new family photo yet, but the last time I walked past the mantel, my old photo was back. Not centered, not spotlighted, but included. That's all I ever wanted, to be seen, to be part of the frame. At the end of a lecture one day, a young cadet lingered. He looked nervous. "Ma'am," he said, "what's the hardest part of war?" I thought for a moment, then answered the only way I knew how. Surviving it without turning your wounds into weapons. Learning to stay when walking away feels easier. That night, as the sun dipped behind the barracks, Olivia found me on the trail near the edge of base. She handed me a small cake in a plastic container, blue icing on top. 3 words: General, Sister, Teacher. And that was enough. Natalie Carter lived most of her life misunderstood, pushed to the margins of her own military family. They believed she had quit West Point, not knowing she'd been recruited into a top-secret intelligence unit where she led covert missions, made life-or-death decisions, and bore silent scars that no one ever asked about. While her sister Olivia rose through the ranks with applause and praise, Natalie remained the family's quiet shame. No photo on the wall, no seat at the table, no recognition. Until one day, a high-ranking general walked into a crowded hall, locked eyes with her, and saluted. In that moment, the silence broke, and the truth spoke for itself. This is a story of betrayal, resilience, and quiet leadership. A reminder that just because someone doesn't speak of their struggle doesn't mean they didn't fight harder than anyone knows. Not every hero needs a spotlight. Some build the stage in silence and still carry the weight of others with grace. Strength doesn't always roar, leadership isn't always visible, and love, real, honest love, sometimes demands the bravery of staying when walking away would be easier. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt unseen, misjudged, or simply needed someone to understand, leave a comment below. Just one line: "I'm listening." Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need it. Because sometimes, just knowing someone is out there makes all the difference. Thank you. You are not invisible.